My wife and I had been married for 2 years before I discovered she was cheating on me. Camilla and I met while I was working as a programmer at a large software business, and we happened to be at the opening of a mutual friend's restaurant, where she became a chef a few months later and was doing well financially. Camilla wasn't the type of girl who wanted me to spend too much time with her, since she assumed I was one of those men who wanted to have a good time with her and then leave. But once she got to know me, she began to let down her guard. I knew she would be tough from the first time we met, but based on how our chat progressed, I knew she would eventually become my woman. I hadn't been in a relationship in a long time, and I wanted someone to share my life and money with. I also wanted to pamper her with all the nice ladies' items I'd seen on other women. We grew closer over time, eventually dating. After we started dating, I started showing Camilla how much I loved her. I began by purchasing her clothes, flowers, hair, shoes, and banks. And I even bought her a new iPhone. She wanted one badly. In fact, the day she said yes to me, I got us 2 tickets for a short summer vacation. The following month, a few weeks after we began dating, I asked Camilla to move in with me so that we could always be together. And she did. We lived together for a year and a few months, and those were some of the most incredible months of my life. Camilla was sweet, caring, and very kind. She would leave the house early in the morning for work and return home as soon as her shift ended. Camilla would usually cook, get a DVD, and set up her room for us to have a romantic movie night before I got home from work. She was very fantastic. And all the while, she lived with me. I never asked her to contribute to the rent, buy groceries, or pay bills. I felt it was my job to handle everything because I had invited her to live with me. I'd occasionally give money to her elderly mother, Lily, whenever she requested financial support. We married shortly afterward, officially becoming a couple, and we continued to live our joyful lives. Camilla returned home with joyful news few months after her remarriage. One evening, she said that someone was opening a large, high-end restaurant down the street, and the restaurant owner contacted her and offered her the role of chief chef. We had already spotted workers refurbishing the property, but we had no idea it would become a restaurant that Camilla would be assigned to run the kitchen. It was beautiful, and that was great news for us, especially because she would be paid nearly twice as much as before and would be closer to home. She didn't need to leave home so early just to avoid traffic. We celebrated her excellent news, and 3 months later she left her previous position. Initially, I expected her to return home earlier than usual because of her new employment and the fact that it was closer to home. But something unusual started to happen. Camilla began to stay out late, frequently returning home around 9 or 10 p.m. At first, it was understandable because she said they were still attempting to fix something in the restaurant kitchen and she needed to assist them. So for the first month, I understood her reasons for constantly arriving home late at night. I went to the restaurant several times and saw her and some other employees. Camille's late nights continued even after the restaurant was fixed and fully operational. There was always one excuse or another. She'd claim she went grocery shopping for the restaurant or bought goods in quantity. She was progressively evolving from the Camilla I knew into someone else. And at one time, I requested her to find another employment since I thought her new restaurant job was separating her from me. We didn't spend as much time together as we used to, and by the time she got home each evening, she was fatigued, showering, and going directly to bed. All of this lasted until I stopped staying up to wait for her. I knew she'd be late anyway, so I'd lock the house and go to bed, and she'd come in with her keys. I was still adjusting to her new personality, and I didn't want to be hard on her because I knew how difficult it was to be a chef. But everything changed. One night, I awoke at 1 a.m. to pee and couldn't find Camilla. So we searched the home and didn't find her. I felt really concerned, so I contacted her numerous times, but she did not respond. There were a lot of thoughts racing through my mind, but the first thing I needed to do was go to her restaurant while jogging down. Camilla called, and as soon as I answered, I heard a stranger's voice. The lady claimed she noticed the phone on the beach and that my constant ringing compelled her to call back. When I heard that, I was astonished that Camilla's phone had been found on the beach, so I went and got it. When I got there, I unlocked her phone and discovered many texts from a guy named Edwin, revealing that Camilla had been cheating on me all along. As devastated as I was, I called Edwin and introduced myself. When he realized it was me, he became silent. Then I urged him to give the phone to Camilla right away. She apologized, but I urged her not to return home since Edwin would pay her debts. So I took the phone home and looked through her images. I noticed shots of her and Edwin together, and I recognized him from the butcher shop. Kamala worked 2 buildings away from here. I also discovered text exchanges between Kamala and Edwin in which she expressed her disdain for her job and supervisor. And if she had her way, she would write a nasty review about him based on how he handled his employees and the quality of the meals they prepared. It was simply perfect. The next morning, I went to Edwin's shop and reported him to management, showing them images of him and my wife and explaining that it was not acceptable for workers to get involved in their clients' personal lives. Fortunately, Edwin's manager had already had numerous complaints about him, and with my report, he was fired. Following that, I headed to the restaurant. Kamala worked there, and I gave the printed discussion between her and Edwin to her manager, who happened to be present. She was fired immediately, leaving the 2 of them jobless. I didn't let her into the house to pick anything because I paid for it with my own money. We eventually divorced, and that was the end of our relationship. I was so depressed. She had violated my confidence by cheating on me with the butcher guy, Opie. I know this is heartbreaking, and I sincerely apologize. It's heartbreaking that your ex-wife cheated on you despite everything you did for her and her family. It's much worse because she took your love and affection for granted. I understand how difficult it is, but you made the correct decision by divorcing and removing her from your life. I even appreciate that you paid them back. They too bear the consequences of their actions against you. Everything will be okay, and maybe you will soon meet someone loyal who will cherish your love and will not believe that it is okay to damage a spouse as your ex-wife did. Thank you for sharing your story with us. Now let us go on to the second story of the day. My wife Amanda and I used to be madly in love. We were kids from the same neighborhood. Even though I was a few years older and ahead of her in school, we knew we liked each other. As teenagers, we spent a lot of time together, and if Amanda attended a house party in the neighborhood, you could find me there as well. When it came time for college, I enrolled a year before her, and she joined me 2 years later. While I was at college, she paid me visits whenever she could, and her parents agreed because they knew we were together. When she eventually joined me, I was obliged to move out of my tiny studio apartment and into a larger home so that we could live together as a couple. I can't put a number on how many years we've been together, but I can say she's been by my side for quite some time. We broke up a few times as teenagers and only got back together once. We even had an ugly fight, and she moved out of our apartment. She did, however, move back in once everything was settled. We were already accustomed to each other, and no matter how often we fought, we'd always fall back into each other's embrace. I honestly loved Amanda and couldn't picture spending my life with anybody else. I'd grown accustomed to her, and even when I tried to flirt with other women, they couldn't compare to Amanda. I was fortunate to be hired by a newspaper firm shortly after graduating from college, and while it was difficult to adjust at first, the money began to flow steadily. When I started earning money, things between Amanda and me improved dramatically, and I could finally afford to buy her the things she desired. Take her to the restaurants she has always wanted us to go to. I also got her some lovely ladies' clothing and other items. Before that, I relied on my parents' money and the meager wages I received from working part-time at a pastry store. While Amanda was still in college, I made every effort to care for her and meet her needs. Amanda did not immediately acquire a job after graduating from college. She sent her CV to various organizations before being called and hired for her new position. Things were easier for us, and I no longer had the burden of caring for everyone on my own. We started splitting bills so that we could save money and do things for ourselves. We chose to get married 2 years after we both started working. We didn't want the huge wedding we had planned as children because we knew the financial strain it would entail. So we chose something small and elegant. Amanda preferred elegant, and I was willing to do whatever she wanted as long as it made her happy. We prepared for the wedding, saved a lot of money, and then returned to our hometown. It was supposed to be a little outdoor wedding, but it ended up being far larger than we had anticipated. Our parents took care of a few things for us, making it more elegant than we expected. The wedding was a success, and we were both overjoyed. Following the wedding, we returned to the city and resumed our normal lives. But we didn't want to have kids right away. I've known Amanda since we were teenagers. She liked going for night walks. She always longed to feel the cool evening breeze in her hair while admiring the stores and lovely streetlights at night. She also enjoyed the city's beauty at night and had become accustomed to taking walks, and when I was less busy, I would accompany her, or she would go without me. Even after we were married. She resumed her night walks, which I had no problem with as long as she went on a busy road or street. For the entire 2 years of our marriage, a guy did not accompany her on walks unless she was fatigued from work, sick, or there was a curfew in the city. Amanda went for a stroll at least 4 times per week, and I never suspected she was doing anything behind my back. Amanda had gone for her customary walk about 11 p.m. and had failed to return. I'm not sure how it happened, but I suddenly developed a taste for donuts. It was so powerful that my nose began to detect the lovely perfume of hot donuts, and I couldn't take it any longer, so I drove to a local donut store. When I arrived, I learned that the donut shop had already closed, which was really disappointing. I had already notified Amanda that I would be gone for a few minutes in case she arrived home and couldn't locate me. I was in the parking lot near the donut shop and about to drive away when someone knocked on my window. I rolled down my window and the guy identified himself as one of the donut store employees. He stated he had just gotten off work and wanted my assistance in passing him some current because his car was not starting. I said okay, and I brought out my wire plugs, and just as we were about to place them on his batteries, my wife walked out of his car and asked, "Did you get any help?" And he replied that I had assisted him. When my wife looked up and realized it was me, she froze in place. I stared at him and told him she was my wife, and he tried to justify it. My wife was unmarried since he'd never seen her wearing a wedding band. Amanda began crying and apologizing. I couldn't believe it. I just took my wires and left without helping him. Amanda contacted my phone several times and did not come home that night. When she returned home the next day, she discovered her things packed outside the house. She implored me and even told me not to let a single mistake ruin our entire relationship. But that was enough for me. She knew how much I despised cheating, and there was no way I could let it go. Our friends and parents were surprised when we divorced, but it was inevitable. Even though we're no longer together, I still think about her. And I know it will be difficult to get over her simply because I refuse to condone a dishonest partner. It must have been difficult for you to discover that your wife and childhood best friend had been cheating on you after being together for years. When someone discovers that their partner is cheating on them, it is devastating, especially if you have poured your heart and soul into your marriage. I'm glad you didn't allow her emotionally manipulate you into staying with her after she broke your trust. And I'm glad you divorced her. You do not need to rush into a new relationship. Allow yourself time to recuperate properly. I wish you the best. Thank you for taking the time to hear today's tales. If you appreciate listening, please like and subscribe if you have not already. Also, leave a comment below with your thoughts on what transpired. If you have a tale to share with me regarding your own or someone else's circumstance, please do not hesitate to contact me. Take care. Now let's move on to the next story. Cheaters are everywhere. There are numerous varieties of cheaters, and everyone has a distinct narrative to tell. Divorce is a humiliating affair in today's environment, where everyone is marrying and divorcing. You lose a lot of self-esteem, but it helps to have friends and family who support you through it all. Life is a precise gift that is too priceless to waste on feeling sorry for oneself. Today's story is about how my wife had 2 children with her boss during the years I was in a coma. The 2 children are not mine. They're his. So my pals go to the story and see what happened there. I was leaving work on Friday night when Dave called out to me, "Do not be late. I am going to beat you tonight." I called back. "I will offer 20 starters and still win at snooker." Dave drove off, laughing and yelling out from his car. "Turn it on and then set it to 20. I'll still win." I said yes. I was a bettor, but only on certainties. I got in my car and drove home to my wife, Jill. She would always go out with the girlfriends on Friday nights. I will not describe my wife. I'll let you make up your own mind regarding her appearance. For me, she is a perfect fit. I went to the club to play snooker. My name? Tom Jones. I work in engineering and got promoted to management after 3 months. I lived only 10 miles from work and the skies were clear. I was approaching a crossroads junction when the lights turned green, allowing me to go through. Seconds later, I was hit by a car that had jumped the lights. He or she was experiencing redness. I awoke at the hospital and there was a nurse in my room. "Nurse, what am I doing here?" "I need to get home," I said. "Lie still." "I'll go get the doctor," she said. I did as I was told. The doctor entered. "Mr. Jones, I need to examine you. Please stay where you are." He asked, "Doctor, why am I in here?" I told Mr. Jones, "Let me examine you and answer your questions." He said he was probing me all around, asking if this hurt. He prodded me repeatedly, asking whether this hurt. No. I kept talking to him. What comes next? 2 police officers walked into the room. "Doctor," as soon as someone spoke to Mr. Jones, one of the officers replied, "No." "Can you wait till I've completed my examination of Mr. Jones?" The doctor stated that the 2 officers sat down and waited. The doctor had finished telling me, "Mr. Jones, to simply lie there. I'll come returning after the police have spoken with you." I did as I was told. "Mr. Jones, please tell us about the accident," one of the policemen said. I looked at him and wondered what he was talking about. "Sir, do you remember? Officers, could you assist me?" "I told Mr. Jones that you were in a car accident on your way home from work on Friday night. You were driving through the green when a car hit you." One of the officers responded, "Yes, I remember now." I stayed within the speed limit. I asked, "Mr. Jones, is there anything you can tell us?" The police responded, "Sorry, no, but how is the other driver?" The other driver died at the crash site. One of the police stated that my wife stormed in at that very moment, calling out, "My darling, you have returned back to me at last. It's been so long, the last 3.5 years. Mrs. Jones, we're discussing with your husband about the vehicle accident. Officer, I'm not sure what happened there." The police departed. Jill hugged and kissed me. Then she added, "Thank God you came back to me." She kissed me again. "Jill, when you came in, you stated you'd finally come back to me. It's been so long. The last 3.5 years. What did you mean?" She stopped dead. "Thomas, nobody told you yet?" "Jill told me what?" The doctor stepped in the room and Jill was sobbing. "Mrs. Jones, have you told him?" The doctor claimed she had her hands on her face, shaking her head, saying, "I thought you had told him. Doctor, what's going on? Mr. Jones, you have been in a coma for the last 3.5 years. I've been here all that time and lost 3.5 years of my life." Jill was sobbing even harder. "Tom, you're alive. That is all that counts," Jill said. "The doctor indicated you'd be here for at least another 6 weeks. We need to do tests on you and get you to walk." Jill flung her arms around me and kissed me, saying, "Get better soon." We chatted a lot. I wanted to know if she was okay. It was time for Jill to leave. I needed to rest. Looking around the room, I noticed a photo of Jill on the side of my bed. My nurse walked in and told Jill to go home. The next day, the exams began. Test after test. They were never ending. My day nurse had to get me out of bed. My feet touched the ground. I couldn't feel the floor. I slipped back onto the bed when my nurse assisted me in standing up. We repeated it until I was standing. My nurse was named Beth. By the end of the first day, I'd found my feet. Jill had called my workplace to inform my colleagues that I had awakened from my coma. They told Jill we'd be there tomorrow. The next day, there was a wheelchair by my bed. I was heading downstairs to the fitness room. Beth had me out of bed by 10 a.m., wheeling me down. The room was large. Looking around, I noticed a structure with handlebars attached. Then a sloping awakening frame and a series of steps. "Beth left me to see you for lunch." She told this large, strapping man nurse, "We're going to get you on your feet. I mean walking." He wheeled me over to the structure, handlebars attached. "Sorry, Mr. Jones. My name is John, and we will be working together from now on." John helped me get to my feet, and I held the handlebars. "By the end of today, you will have reached the end of this 12-foot walking frame," John stated. I gazed at him, then at the structure before returning to him. "I cannot move." I said, "Don't worry, we have plenty of time." "Mr. Jones," John asked, "every time you put one foot forward, tell me what you're interested in." I had done 20 movements and was exhausted. Beth strolled in, saying, "It's time for lunch." John and Beth assisted me into the wheelchair, and Beth returned me to my room for lunch. Lunch is over, and Beth wheeled me down and back onto the framework till dinner. Beth picked me up, I ate dinner, and I fell asleep. When I woke up, Jill was there. She informed me that Dave and someone else were coming to see me tomorrow. It would be Tuesday night. I'll let you talk to your friends alone. Jill informed me that the following day I would be back with John. I finished my food and dozed asleep. Beth awakened me and left the door open. I heard two voices outside my room, and this is what the other man said. I feel bad for Tom. He has no idea what his wife has done for the past 3.5 years. The other man asked, "What do you mean?" Dave stated, "Don't tell me you don't know." The other man responded, "Go on, tell me." Dave explained, "Well, she had been ducking her boss, and he is married with 3 children. Tom's wife has had 2 children with her boss during the years he has been in a coma, and the children are in a home. She will not foster them." The other man added, "Tom will definitely kick the base," Dave said, "and that is not all." The other man asked, "Why? What else is there?" Dave claims she is a pole dancer at the large King Club. The other man replied, "Big King Club? That is a knocking shop. Tom will definitely kick her." Dave asked, "Well, what else do you know?" Dave claims she took over as her boss on Tuesdays and Thursdays and calls her a tramp. The other man said, "Don't say anything to Tom." "Just forget about it," Dave advised. Beth returned and said, "You can go in now." Dave and the other men entered, and Dave announced, "This is Phil." We chatted, and I kept looking over at Jill's photograph. Dave and Phil had no idea what was going through my brain. They went, and tears streamed down my cheeks. Back on the framework, Jill approached and kissed me, adding, "Fred, our neighbor is coming tomorrow night. I'll let you two have a good man-to-man conversation on Thursday night." That's when I connected the dots on Friday. So back to the foundation. This time, my steps increased. I pushed myself as hard as I could. SAT. Jill was late. I knew the reason I gazed at her was hatred in me, but I didn't have proof. I thought to myself, wait until I get out of here. I asked Beth for a phone book. She handed it to me. She left it with me, and I called APD. I asked if he could come to visit me this afternoon. He was here in 30 minutes. I handed him Jill's photo and told him I needed to know who she was seeing through images and videos. "How much will this cost me?" I explained to my PD. He said, $1,000. That night, Jill approached me and asked, "Where has my photo gone?" "It must have fallen into the trash can. I said I'd bring you a new one tomorrow," she said. For the next 3 weeks, I walked up the steps and incline walk. John was making bets for me, and I was betting with his money. I only bet on certainty. I told John I was winning, and in 3 weeks, I had $2,000. I advised John to quit betting on me, but retain the money. 2 days after overhearing what Dave and Phil were saying, I began formulating arrangements. But they had to wait until I was on my feet. The following day, Beth arrived. "I need to wash you," Beth said. Beth stripped and cleansed my entire body. "Beth? Who else has been washing me over the previous 3.5 years?" I said. She looked at me and said, "3 of us, Gail and Kath. Catherine is divorced. Both Gail and I are single. Beth, you have been washing my private areas." "Yes." She left me to respond in a little. I lay back and thought of Jill. The doctor walked in and told me, "I think you can go home in a week if you're doing well." With that, I called my PD. He said he'd bring the images over, the report and recordings. I went down and asked Tony for the 2 grants. He gave it to me so that I could pay my PD. I now had all the proof I required. I went back down to Tony and handed him $500. Last week at the hospital, I received private care from Beth and Gail, but the finest was from Kath. Update 1. I left the hospital and returned home. The house was exactly the same, but there was no love there. Jill is the only person I dislike. I was having difficulties with Jill all week, so I contacted my PD back and asked him to give me the lowdown on the Big King Club. And Jill. He guessed why it was a knocking shop. He walked to the club and demanded to see the proprietor. He asked the owner if he recognized the woman in the photo. Then he told the owner, "Before you respond, I understand she works here as a pole dancer." The owner looked at my PD and replied, "Yes, she works here." My PD informed him that she was a prostitute and was paid by his male members. When Jill arrived for work, she was instructed to leave. "Don't come back here." My PD provided me the information on Friday. On Monday, I went to work and asked to meet my big boss. He was glad to see me and asked when I was coming back. But he said the job I had been promised had been filled, and I would have to return to my old job for a while. I knew it was over 3.5 years ago, and who could blame him? I asked him if I might go to the shop floor and see Dave and Phil. "Can we meet after work for a pint?" They said yes. I met Dave and Phil in the pub. I have a few questions for you, but mainly for Phil. Yes, Tom. What would you like to ask me? Phil said, Phil, before I ask you, I am returning to work in 2 weeks and we will be working together, so our friendship will be important. Yes. He picked up his pint and began drinking. Phil, I just want to know the truth. About what you know about my wife, Jill. He almost dropped his pint. He looked at me and said, What do you mean? Phil, I overheard you in the hospital as you waited to see me with Dave. Let me tell you what you said to David. I told Tom, I have to go. I don't want to get involved in this conversation either. Dave said he got up and left. I looked at Phil. Phil Beth had wakened me up. I overheard 2 voices outside my room. A man was speaking to Dave. That was you. You were telling Dave. I feel bad for Tom. He has no idea what his wife has done for the past 3.5 years. He said, Don't tell me you don't know. Go ahead then. Tell me. Dave spoke to you. Well, she had been ducking her boss, who is married with 3 children. Tom's wife has 2 children with her boss. He has been in a coma for 3.5 years, and the children are in a home, and she will not foster them out. You said Tom will kick the base, that's for sure, Dave said. And that wasn't all you said. Why? What else is there? Dave stated that she is horrified, dancer in the Big King Club. You said she avoided her boss, Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday. She is a tramp, you said. Don't say anything to Tom, simply forget about it. Dave said Beth returned and told you both. You can go in now. You and Dave entered, and Dave said, This is Phil. All I want to know is, do you know anything else about Joe? I purchased a round of drinks. He had time to think. I know one thing for sure. The other statement may not be correct. Phil said, Spit it out, Phil. She is ducking someone as she goes shopping. I don't know his name, but he's good at getting married women to duck. And I told Tom, this may not be true, but she has had a few bangs. Phil said, Thanks for telling me about another drink before we leave. I stated, At that time, I would have kicked her, and I was not going to prison for a slot. My hatred increased in a second update to the rest of that week. I was so troubled. Stick to my plan. I told myself on Friday that I needed to go to the hospital for a checkup. I saw Kath, and she noticed me. I asked her on a date. We were supposed to meet outside the store where Jill did her shopping on Saturday, while I waited for Kath. Jill walked out with a good-looking lad, got into his car, and drove off. I clenched my fists and bit my lip. They were going to practice ducking. I was staring into space when Kath tapped me on the shoulder. What's your opinion worth? She said. I shook my head, embraced Kath, and kissed her. How long do we have? I can't sit for you, my love, all the time in the world. We went to the cats and were in bed quickly. I continued my exercises to increase my strength and confirmed her boss's name. I followed Jill on Monday night, shortly after she finished work. She went to the home where her 2 children were. I went home and waited for Jill to get home. She came in and kissed me as there was nothing wrong. Fancy trying to make love to me tonight. She said to me, Please give me more time. Let me find my feet first, I said. The following day, I went to the home and told them I was the husband of Jill, and I wanted to see the 2 kids. I showed them our marriage photo, and they let me see the 2 kids. Both the kids were walking. I had thanked the staff before I left. I asked them if we could have them for the weekend, and I would pick them both up. I gave them the idea we were going to take the kids back. They were all in favor of it. I knew where her boss lived and what time he would be home on Friday night. I went to the home and picked up the 2 kids. Then I drove to her boss's house, knocked on her boss's front door. His wife answered. I planned to be in a bit of a state, saying, My wife has collapsed. Could you please look after my 2 kids while I get an ambulance? She agreed, and I put the kids down on the floor, running out. I went home and Jill walked in. Come on, my love. We have to do something special tonight. I said. We jumped in the car and headed for her boss's house. Jill did seem to know the street as I pulled up. Come on, Jill, I got a surprise for you. I said we went up to the front door and I said, Stand there a minute. I knocked on the door and his wife answered. You have been a long time, she said. Sorry. Can my wife and I come in? I said. Then Jill came into view and his wife let us in. They are in here, she said. Her husband walked in the room and looked at Jill. His mouth dropped wide open and Jill did the same. I turned to his wife saying, "This is my wife, and your husband has been ducking her for the last 3.5 years, and the 2 kids are not mine. They're his." Jill burst out crying, and he walked over to her, holding her tight. "Well, that's a pretty sight," I said. "Jill, I will bring in your clothes for you to live here with that cheating blast of a boss of yours. From now on, sorry, you have an extra whore to live with you in. 2 more kids, they're his. Jill, I will have the divorce papers served soon." "Excuse me, mister," his wife said to me. "How do you know they are my husband's kids and not yours?" She said, "Easy. I have been in a coma for 3.5 ducking years. Ask them, not me." Just then there was a knock on the door. His wife opened it. "Are you Mrs. Jill Jones?" the man said. "No, I think that is her over there," she said. He walked over to my wife. "Are you Mrs. Jill Jones?" the man said. "Yes," Jill said. "You have been served." Jill turned to me saying, "Tom, please let me explain." "Jill, you want to explain it here and now with your lover and his wife?" I said. She looked at both and at me. The boss's wife said, "I cannot listen to this. I think you 3 should get out of my house and take your best kids with you. And you were told if this was to happen again, it's divorce for us." He let go of Jill and went to his wife to hold her, and she hit him across the face. "Get the fuck out of here, you 3!" she screamed. Her boss picked up one of the kids and Jill the other one. They went back to the home and got rid of the kids. I was busy changing the door locks when Jill and her boss turned up at my door. "Tom, please let me explain," she said. "I looked at her and she was a mess. You 2 had best come in then?" I said. I poured out 3 drinks. I wanted to throw one in his cheating face. Jill was trembling. They both sat next to one another. I glared at him. He took the hint that he got up and sat away from Jill. Balls to this. I have nothing to lose. I have already lost it to this past and others, I said to myself. "Jill, so you have come for your things. I will help you pack them." No, I have come to explain," Jill said. "Jill, you have had over 3.5 years to get ready to say what I think you are going to say, but I want to go first," I said. Jill explained this to me. "Why did you not tell me weeks ago what had been going on?" "No, don't answer that. Let me tell you what I know about what you have been doing. Jill, here's a file on you. When that passed over there with a smug on his face. What's inside it are photos of you and him in your hotel room. A report from my PD and recordings of you after I came out of the coma weeks ago. You 2 have been ducking each other on Tuesday, Thursday, and so is nights. And you 2 have passed us in a home, and you Slot will not give them up. You are ducking a good-looking lad who works where you go shopping on Saturday. I saw you with him at the weekend, and I was told about him. Why were you working in the Big King Club as a pole dancer? It's always been a knocking shop, and you Slot has been picking up members for more as a prostitute, and the last one. How many banks have you had in the last 3.5 ducking years? Yes, I know about them." Her boss glared at Jill. He seemed not to know. Jill was crying for the world. I did not give a duck for her, and that smog on his face had gone. "Jill, get your things and get out with this past. Next time I will see you is in court. Get a lawyer soon." "I want rid of you, whore." Update 3, Jill packed and left with him. I was somewhat happy, and I finished fitting the new locks. I sat down with a glass full. No, that's not the way, I said to myself. I left the glass on the table, jumped in the car, and headed for Kat's house. I knocked at the door, and Kath called out through the door, "It's me, Tom." She opened the door, and I held her with both hands and kissed her for so long. From that Friday night, we became true lovers. I asked Kath to change her job. I wanted her to be home with me at night. Monday, I went back to work. Dave and Phil asked me what was going on. All I said was divorce. The divorce moved on smoothly at first, but her boss said the 2 kids were not his. He threw a spanner in the works. His wife filed for divorce, and she wanted DNA tests done on Jill's 2 kids to find out the truth. The test came back, and both were her boss's kids. I am not going to go through court procedure using the highlights. We went to court for our divorce. Jill took the stand and tried to explain why she did it. She stated it was because I was not supposed to live, and her employer took pity on and seduced her. I called out, seduced for 3.5 years. I was yelled off, and I felt like a naughty 2-year-old kid. I sat there and listened to the lies she told one after another. Now it was my turn through my lawyer. My lawyer gave the court the images of her with her boss in the hotel room. The next thing was the recording to be shown. I wanted to crawl beneath the desk. I had already watched them before I handed them to my lawyer. Jill was not expecting any recording of her with her boss. The two of them had already been 3.5 years of ducking. That's 243 evenings of ducking. And the extra 9 days since I was out of the hospital. I loathed Jill and her boss. If I could get away with it, I would have got his balls off and shuffled them down his throat. My lawyer pushed the play button and the program began. Jill and her unfaithful boss went inside the hotel room where my PD had high-tech to spy cameras put up. They did not goof around. They got down to what they were there for: sex. He is hungry for her, and she for him. We sat there and watched it. Maybe we skipped the other recordings. They were the same, my lawyer stated. After we had watched the recording of Jill and her supervisor, my lawyer pulled out a trump card. My client has been in the hospital for 3.5 years in a coma. 4 weeks of testing and 6 weeks learning how to walk. Yes, he was fed via tubes and lost some weight. The health services absorbed the cost of his recuperation, and when he stayed home for 3 weeks before he returned to work, his wife looked after him, and he utilized $500 from his winnings. Mrs. Jill Jones has a private bank account with a huge sum of money in it. My lawyer indicated in the last 3.5 years she had little amounts paid in. Then there were larger amounts, including other same amounts. The greater amounts are from the night that she worked as a pole dancer, the tiny amounts from 2 guys, her boss, and the man from the store. You will also see higher sums paid if we assume they represent payments from a few banks. My client is entitled to half of this money when the divorce is approved. I looked at Jill, and she was looking at the floor, then looking at me, shaking her head, drying her eyes. Final update. I obtained my divorce and half her ill-acquired gains. She had become a slot whore and a prostitute. Her 2 kids were fostered, and she would never see them again. Her employer was divorced, and his wife took him to the cleaners. The company where Jill and her boss work issued them notice. Her employer turned his back on Jill. Jill had a job at a supermarket with her excellent-looking lad. Work that lasted around 3 months. He threw her out. Jill moved away. I never heard or saw her again. Thank God. 12 months later, her boss was in hospital with broken legs. Some other husband did it to him. I wish I had the courage to do it to the best. He would have gotten a bit more from me for what he had in 3.5 years. As for me, I married Kath a month after the divorce was through, and we have never looked back. We have 4 kids, 2 of each, and I have been on cloud 9 for the rest of my life with the woman I love so very much. It's about time to say to my supporters a huge thank you. Remember, this channel exists because of your support, and I want it to be a place where we can all come together, learn, and have a great time. Your feedback is vital, and I appreciate every single suggestion and comment you provide. Take care of yourself, and see you soon.